Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars streak by through the view screen. This was humanity's first journey beyond their home system, and he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. His crew had been chosen from the best Earth had to offer. Park Yuna sat at the tactical station, her fingers dancing over the controls. Kim Jisoo monitored the engines from her position, while Choi Wanbin handled communications. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," Park Yuna reported. "Long-range sensors are picking up something big." Lee Minho nodded. The deep space probe had detected signs of advanced technology in this sector. If they were lucky, they might make first contact with an alien civilization. Earth's leaders had given him clear instructions: be peaceful, be respectful, and above all, avoid any actions that could be seen as hostile. "On screen," he ordered. The view screen shimmered and revealed a massive ship unlike anything they had ever seen. It was at least 10 times larger than the Defiance, with curved hull plates that seemed to glow with inner light. Elegant spires extended from its surface, and weapon ports were clearly visible along its length. "Magnificent," whispered Dr. Han, Sora from her science station. "The technology required to build something like that must be centuries ahead of ours." Choi Wanbin looked up from his console. "Captain, they're scanning us. Very thorough scans. They know everything about our ship now." "Open a channel," Lee Minho said. "Let's make history." The view screen changed to show the interior of the alien ship. The being that appeared was tall and muscular, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Golden armor covered its chest, and its eyes were a deep purple color. Other similar beings stood behind it in perfect formation. "I am Admiral Thexvar of the Vellani Empire," the alien said. Its voice was deep and commanding. "You will surrender your vessel immediately and submit to Imperial authority." Lee Minho blinked in surprise. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. "I'm Captain Lee Minho of the United Earth ship Defiance. We come in peace, seeking friendship and understanding between our peoples." Admiral Thexvar's expression did not change. "Peace is earned through strength. You are weak. Your ship is primitive. Your weapons are laughable. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." "Wait," Lee Minho said, raising his hands. "There's no need for violence. We have no intention of threatening you or your empire. We're explorers, not warriors." "Explorers," Thexvar laughed, a harsh sound. "You dare enter Vellani space without permission? This is an act of war, but we are merciful. Surrender, and we will give you the honor of serving the Empire as slaves." Park Yuna leaned forward in her chair. "Captain?" "Their weapons are charging!" Lee Minho's mind raced. Everything was going wrong. Earth's first contact protocols had prepared them for many scenarios, but not this. "Admiral Thexvar, please, let us talk. We can work something out. There's no need for anyone to die today." "Your words prove your weakness," Thexvar said with disgust. "A true warrior would face death with honor, not beg like a coward. You are not worthy of honorable combat. We will take your ship and study your pathetic technology." The alien admiral gestured with one of his 4 arms. On the view screen, Lee Minho could see weapon ports opening along the massive ship's hull. "Shields up," he shouted. "Evasive maneuvers." Park Yuna's hands flew over her controls. "Shields at maximum, all weapons online." But it was too late. The Vellani ship fired, and the universe exploded into light and pain. The Defiance shook like a toy in a hurricane. Sparks flew from damaged consoles and the lights flickered. "Direct hit to the engine section," Kim Jisoo reported, her voice tight with stress. "We've lost main power. Backup systems are failing." "Return fire!" Lee Minho ordered. The Defiance's weapons struck the alien ship, but they might as well have been throwing rocks at a mountain. The Vellani vessel didn't even slow down. "Their shields absorbed everything," Park Yuna said. "Our weapons can't penetrate their defenses." Another blast rocked the ship. This time, the artificial gravity failed for several seconds, sending everyone floating before the backup systems kicked in. "Hull breach on Deck 3, Kim Ji-soo announced. "Emergency force fields are holding, but barely." Choi Wonbin looked up from his station, blood running from a cut on his forehead. "Captain, they're jamming our communications. We can't call for help." Lee Min-ho gripped the arms of his chair as another blast sent shockwaves through the ship. They were outgunned, outclassed, and completely at the mercy of these aliens who seemed to view violence as the only form of communication. "This is Admiral Thexvar," the alien's voice came over the speakers. "Your ship is disabled. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in immediate execution." "Captain," Park Yuna said quietly, "we can't fight them. Their technology is too advanced." Lee Min-ho looked around at his crew. These were good people, the best humanity had to offer. They didn't deserve to die because of his decisions. "Stand down, weapons. Open the docking bay." "Sir?" Park Yuna looked shocked. "We're not dead yet," Lee Min-ho said. "And as long as we're alive, there's hope." The boarding was swift and efficient. Volani soldiers poured into the ship, their movements precise and coordinated. They carried weapons that hummed with energy and wore armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Within minutes, the entire crew of the Defiance was captured. The humans were herded into the cargo bay, their hands bound with energy restraints that tingled with electric current. The Volani soldiers were silent and professional, treating their prisoners like packages to be delivered. Admiral Thexvar entered the cargo bay, his heavy footsteps echoing off the metal walls. He looked down at the captured humans with something that might have been disappointment. "So these are the mighty explorers who dared enter our space," he said. "Pathetic. Look at them, cowering like frightened animals." Lee Min-ho stood up, ignoring the energy restraints that bit into his wrists. "We're not your enemies. We just wanted to meet you, to learn from each other." "Learn?" Thexvar laughed again. "What could primitive creatures like you possibly teach the Volani Empire? We have conquered 100 worlds. We have defeated species with technology far more advanced than yours. And we did it through honor, through strength, through the nobility of combat." "There has to be another way," Dr. Han Sora said, from where she knelt on the floor. "Violence isn't the only solution." "Spoken like a true coward," Thexvar replied. "This is why your species will never amount to anything. You lack the warrior spirit. You seek compromise instead of victory." The Admiral turned to his soldiers. "Take them to the detention cells. We'll study them, learn about their technology, and then decide what to do with them. Perhaps they'll make useful slaves." As the humans were led away, Lee Min-ho caught Park Yuna's eye. She gave him a small nod. They weren't beaten yet. These aliens might have superior technology and firepower, but they clearly didn't understand humans at all. That misunderstanding, Lee Min-ho thought as they were marched through the corridors of the Volani ship, might be their greatest mistake. The detention cell was a perfect cube of smooth metal walls, with no visible seams or openings except for the energy barrier that served as a door. Lee Min-ho and his crew sat on the cold floor, their energy restraints having been removed once. They were locked inside. The Volani clearly believed their prison was escape-proof. "Captain," Park Yuna whispered, "what's the plan?" Lee Min-ho looked around at his crew. They were bruised and tired, but their eyes still held determination. "We get out of here, but not the way they expect." Kim Ji-soo was already examining the walls, running her hands over the smooth surface. "The metal is some kind of alloy I've never seen before, but the basic principles should be the same. Every ship needs certain systems to function." "What are you thinking?" Dr. Han Sora asked. "Every prison, no matter how advanced, has to connect to the ship's main systems somehow," Kim Ji-soo explained. "Air circulation, waste disposal, power distribution. If we can access any of those systems, we might be able to cause problems." Choi Wanbin nodded slowly. I've been listening to their communications. Their language is complex, but I'm starting to understand the basics. They have very rigid protocols for everything. No flexibility at all. That could work in our favor, Lee Minho said. They're used to dealing with enemies who fight the same way they do. Direct confrontation, honor codes, predictable tactics. Park Yuna smiled grimly. But we don't fight fair, do we? Over the next several hours, they put their plan into action. Kim Ji-soo discovered that the ventilation system connected to every part of the ship. More importantly, it linked directly to the waste processing center. She began working on the air circulation panel using tools improvised from pieces of their uniforms and personal items. Their waste disposal system is incredibly sophisticated, she explained as she worked, but that makes it complicated. Lots of moving parts, lots of sensors, lots of things that can go wrong if you know what you're doing. Meanwhile, Choi Wanbin was learning more about Vellani communication protocols by listening to the guards' conversations. They're very formal, he reported. Everything has to be done in a specific order, with specific words. They never deviate from the script. Dr. Han Sora was observing their captors' behavior patterns. They're warriors, but they're also very rigid in their thinking. They expect certain responses to certain actions. When something doesn't fit their expectations, they get confused. After 12 hours, Kim Ji-soo was ready. I've identified the main waste processing unit. If I can cause a cascade failure in their filtration system, it will create pressure imbalances throughout the ship. Their automated systems will try to compensate, but I'm going to give them some bad information. How bad? Lee Minho asked. Kim Ji-soo grinned. Remember the time the sewage system backed up in the academy dormitories? Imagine that, but in space, with alien technology that's never encountered creative sabotage. She began her work, carefully, introducing small malfunctions that would build on each other. The beauty of the plan was that each individual change seemed minor, but together they would create chaos. First, the air circulation in the detention block began to smell strange. The guards noticed but dismissed it as a minor glitch. Then, the waste disposal system in the lower decks started making unusual noises. Again, the Vellani assumed it was a temporary problem, but Kim Ji-soo had been careful to create a domino effect. As each system tried to compensate for the problems in the others, the malfunctions spread. Within hours, half the ship was dealing with backed-up waste systems, air that smelled like a swamp, and pressure alarms going off everywhere. Now comes the fun part, Dr. Han Sora said. She had been pretending to be sick, clutching her stomach and moaning. When the guards came to check on the prisoners, she was ready. Please, she gasped. I need medical attention. Something's wrong with my digestive system. I think it's reacting to your ship's atmosphere. The guards were unsure what to do. Their protocols didn't cover alien medical emergencies. After much debate, they decided to take her to the medical bay, with 2 guards as escorts. Once there, Dr. Han Sora continued her performance while secretly observing everything around her. She noted the location of medical supplies, the layout of the corridors, and most importantly, the security protocols the guards followed. Your anatomy is most unusual, the Vellani doctor said, running a scanner over her. I cannot determine. What is wrong? Maybe it's psychological, Dr. Han Sora suggested. My species often has stress reactions to captivity. Perhaps if I could speak with my crewmates, it would help. The doctor was puzzled. Vellani warriors never showed weakness or fear, so the concept of psychological stress was foreign to them. After consulting with the guards, they agreed to let her return to the detention cell, but with a monitoring device attached. What they didn't know was that Dr. Han Sora had palmed a small medical instrument while pretending to be in pain. It wasn't much, but it was something Kim Ji-soo could use. Back in the cell, the crew compared notes. The medical bay connects directly to the main computer system, Dr. Han Sora reported. And I've learned something interesting about their psychology. They literally cannot understand deception. It's not part of their warrior culture. Perfect, Choi Wanbin said. I've been working on their communication protocols. I think I can send false messages through their system, but only if I can access a terminal. The next phase of their plan was the most dangerous. Kim Ji-soo used the medical instrument to create a more serious malfunction in the detention block's systems. Sparks flew from the control panel, and the energy barrier flickered. The guards rushed in to investigate, exactly as the humans had hoped. While they were distracted by the electrical problems, Park Yuna put her military training to work. She moved like a shadow, using techniques the Villani had never seen before. The first guard went down without making a sound, struck at pressure points that Dr. Han Sora had identified during her medical examination. The second guard turned just in time to see his partner collapse, but Park Yuna was already behind him. Their nervous systems are similar to ours, Dr. Han Sora had explained. Apply pressure here and here and they'll be unconscious for hours. With the guards neutralized, the crew moved quickly. Choi Wanbin accessed the communication terminal and began sending false emergency messages throughout the ship. Reports of fires, system failures, and security breaches flooded the Villani command center. Multiple emergencies on Deck 7, he transmitted in perfect Villani. Request immediate assistance. Hull breach in Section 12. All personnel evacuate immediately. Warning, contamination detected in main engineering. Seal all access points. The rigid Villani protocols worked against them. Each false emergency triggered specific responses. Guards abandoned their posts to respond to the fabricated crises. Engineers shut down systems based on the fake reports. The ship descended into organized chaos. While the Villani ran around trying to deal with imaginary problems, the humans made their way back to the docking bay where the Defiance waited. The ship was damaged, but still functional. They didn't bother to post guards, Park Yuna observed. They never imagined we could escape. Their mistake, Lee Min-ho said as they boarded their ship. Kim Ji-soo, can you get us out of here? The engines are damaged, but I can give you emergency power, she replied, already working at her station. It won't be fast, but it'll get us away from here. As the Defiance limped away from the Villani ship, Admiral Thexvar's voice came over the radio. He sounded furious and confused. How did you escape? What kind of warriors are you? Lee Min-ho activated the communication system. We're not warriors, Admiral. We're humans, and humans don't fight clean. The last thing they saw as they jumped to faster-than-light travel was the massive Villani ship, dead in space, its crew still trying to figure out what had happened to their supposedly perfect systems. News of the human escape spread through the Villani Empire like wildfire. In the grand halls of the Imperial Palace, Admiral Thexvar stood before the High Council, his 4 arms trembling with rage and humiliation. Impossible, declared Counselor Vex Thul, the eldest member of the ruling body. No species has ever escaped from our detention facilities. You must have made an error. There was no error, Thexvar replied through gritted teeth. These humans use tactics we have never encountered. They sabotaged our systems in ways that should not be possible. You are saying that a primitive species with inferior technology defeated the might of the Villani Empire? Another counselor laughed. Perhaps you are growing soft, Admiral. Thexvar's purple eyes flashed with anger. Grant me a full battle fleet. I will hunt down these cowards and show them the true meaning of Villani power. Meanwhile, the damaged Defiance drifted through an asteroid field hidden among the tumbling rocks. Emergency repairs were underway, but the ship was in bad shape. Sparks still flew from damaged consoles, and the artificial gravity flickered occasionally. How long until we can contact Earth? Lee Min-ho asked. Choi Wanbin shook his head. The long-range communication array took a direct hit. It'll take weeks to repair, assuming we can find the right parts. We can't outrun them forever, Park Yuna said, studying the tactical display. Their ships are faster and better armed than anything we have. Dr. Hans Sora looked up from her research station. Captain, I've been analyzing the data we collected about the Volani. Their entire civilization is built around concepts of honor and direct confrontation. They've conquered dozens of species, but they've all fought according to the same basic rules. What kind of rules? Kim Jisoo asked. Ship-to-ship combat in open space, formal declarations of war, predictable battle formations. They win through superior technology and discipline, not through strategy or innovation. Lee Min-ho sat back in his chair, thinking. So they've never faced an enemy that doesn't follow their rules. Exactly. Every species they've encountered has accepted their way of warfare, but we don't have to. Over the next several days, the crew of the Defiance began preparing for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They couldn't match Volani technology, so they wouldn't try. Instead, they would fight smart. Kim Jisoo worked on creating improvised weapons from their remaining supplies. We can't make anything that will penetrate their shields directly, she explained. But we don't need to. We just need to create problems they can't solve with brute force. She began constructing mines from spare reactor cores and navigation. Sensors. They weren't powerful enough to destroy a Volani ship, but they would create electromagnetic pulses that could disable electronics temporarily. The beauty is that they're completely unpredictable, she said, showing her work to the captain. Their computers won't be able to calculate safe approach vectors because there's no pattern to follow. Choi Wanbin was working on a different kind of weapon. Information warfare. I figured out how to mimic their communication protocols. I can make it look like messages are coming from their own ships. What's the plan? Park Yuna asked. Confusion, fear, doubt. If I can make their fleet commanders think they're receiving contradictory orders, they'll waste time trying to sort out the truth. Dr. Hans Sora had made the most important discovery of all. Captain, I've found a critical weakness in their psychology. The Volani are physically incapable of understanding deception. It's not that they choose not to lie, they literally cannot comprehend the concept. How is that possible? Their brains evolved differently than ours. They're wired for absolute honesty and direct communication. It makes them incredibly effective warriors within their own cultural framework, but it also makes them vulnerable to tactics they can't even imagine. Park Yuna smiled grimly. They think everyone fights the way they do, and that's going to get them killed, Lee Min-ho said. When Thexvar's fleet arrived at the asteroid field, they found no trace of the human ship. Instead, they discovered a trail of debris that suggested the Defiance had been destroyed in a collision with an asteroid. Pathetic, Thexvar muttered. They could not even face us in honorable combat. But as his ships spread out to search for survivors, the real battle began. The first mine detonated near the flagship, sending cascading electrical failures through its forward shields. Before the Volani could react, 2 more mines exploded on opposite sides of the formation. "Report!" Thexvar demanded. "Unknown energy signatures, Admiral. We cannot determine the source of the attacks." "Impossible. Show me the tactical display." But the display showed empty space. The mines were too small to register on their sensors until they exploded, and by then, it was too late. "Sir, we're receiving orders to retreat," the communications officer reported. "From whom?" "From Admiral Korth's flagship, sir." Thexvar's eyes narrowed. "Admiral Korth is 3 systems away. How can he be sending orders from here?" What he didn't know was that Choi Wanbin was hiding among the asteroids, using captured Volani communication codes to sow confusion throughout the fleet. False orders were being transmitted from multiple sources, each one seeming to come from a different ship. "Admiral, the Thunderbolt is reporting engine failure and requesting immediate assistance." "Admiral, the Vanguard says they've detected enemy ships approaching from the starboard flank." "Admiral, Fleet Command is ordering all ships to form up for a direct assault on the human homeworld." Thexvar's rigid military training worked against him. In Volani culture, officers never questioned orders from their superiors. The idea that someone might send false communications was incomprehensible, so when he received contradictory instructions from what appeared to be legitimate sources, he couldn't determine which ones were real. While the Volani fleet struggled with communication chaos, the Defiant struck again. Kim Ji-soo had created a new type of weapon, debris missiles. They looked like normal asteroid fragments but contained hidden engines and guidance systems. "Incoming asteroids," a Volani sensor operator reported. "Destroy them," Thexvar ordered. The fleet's weapons opened fire, shattering the approaching rocks. But as the debris scattered, each piece revealed its true nature. Hundreds of smaller projectiles spread out in all directions, each one guided by a simple computer program. They weren't designed to penetrate Volani armor. Instead, they attached themselves to the ship's hulls and began transmitting false sensor data. Suddenly, every Volani ship appeared to be surrounded by enemy vessels that existed only in their computers. "Admiral, we're detecting human ships on all sides." "How many?" "At least 50, sir. Maybe more. They're everywhere." But there was only one human ship, hidden in the asteroid field and using holographic projectors to create false images. Park. Yuna had studied Volani sensor technology during their captivity and found ways to exploit its limitations. "They can see what we want them to see," she explained to the crew. "Their sensors are incredibly advanced, but they're designed to detect real objects. They're not programmed to filter out deliberate deception." The battle continued for hours, but it wasn't really a battle in any sense the Volani understood. They fired their weapons at targets that didn't exist while the real threat remained hidden. Their rigid formation broke apart as ships maneuvered to avoid imaginary enemies. Finally, Thexvar made the only decision that made sense to his warrior mindset. "All ships, retreat to safe distance. We will regroup and plan a proper assault." As the Volani fleet withdrew, Lee Min-ho allowed himself a small smile. They had faced impossible odds and not only survived but forced their enemies to retreat. But he knew this was just the beginning. "They'll be back," Park Yuna said, "and next time they'll be ready for our tricks." "Then we'll have to come up with new ones," Dr. Han Sora replied. "The good news is that they still don't understand what they're fighting." "And what's that?" Kim Ji-soo asked. "An enemy that doesn't play by any rules they recognize," Lee Min-ho said. "We're going to teach the galaxy a new way to fight." In the depths of space, the Defiance continued its repairs while its crew planned their next move. They were just 5, humans against an empire of billions, but they had something their enemies lacked: the willingness to fight dirty and the creativity to turn any situation to their advantage. 3 weeks after the asteroid field battle, the Volani High Command was in chaos. Reports were flooding in from across the empire of human attacks, but none of them made sense. Multiple ships were being reported in different sectors simultaneously, engaging in hit-and-run tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. "How many human vessels are there?" demanded Counselor Vexthul during an emergency session. Admiral Thexvar studied the tactical display, his 4 arms moving nervously. "Intelligence suggests anywhere from 5 to 50 ships, sir. The reports are contradictory." "Contradictory? How can reports be contradictory?" "The humans appear to be using some form of advanced stealth technology. They strike without warning, cause significant damage, and vanish before our ships can respond." What the Volani didn't know was that there was still only one human ship. The Defiance had been repaired and modified with salvaged Volani technology, but more importantly, it was being operated by a crew that understood the power of misdirection. "Captain." Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge, watching as they approached another Volani supply convoy. "Choi Won-bin, are we broadcasting the correct identification codes?" "Yes, sir. As far as their sensors can tell, we're the VES Dominator, returning from patrol duty in Sector 7. The deception was elaborate. Kim Ji-soo had modified their hull. to reflect Villani sensor signatures, while Choi Wanbin had programmed their computers to respond to communication challenges with proper Villani protocols. To any outside observer, the Defiance looked exactly like a standard Villani destroyer. "Convoy leader is requesting our patrol report," Choi Wanbin announced. "Send them the standard all-clear message," Lee Min-ho ordered. "Tell them Sector 7 is secure, and we're returning to base for resupply." Dr. Han Sora had spent weeks studying captured Villani data, learning their military procedures and command structures. "The beauty of their system is its predictability," she had explained. "They follow the same protocols every time. Once you know the rules, you can use them against them." The convoy consisted of 12 cargo ships carrying food, medical supplies, and replacement parts for the outer colonies. They were escorted by 4 destroyers and a heavy cruiser, more than enough firepower to deal with any conventional threat. But the humans weren't conventional. "We're receiving clearance to join the convoy formation," Park Yuna reported from the tactical station. As the Defiance took its assigned position, Kim Ji-soo was already at work. She had developed a new weapon specifically for this mission, a computer virus disguised as a routine maintenance update. "Their ships automatically synchronize their databases when they're in formation," she explained. "It's supposed to ensure all vessels have the latest tactical information. But if one ship has corrupted data," the virus spread through the convoy's network like wildfire. It didn't damage their systems directly. Instead, it began subtly altering their sensor readings, communication protocols, and navigation data. Within an hour, the convoy was lost. Not physically lost. They knew where they were. But their computers thought they were somewhere else entirely. Navigation systems showed contradictory readings. Communication channels began carrying garbled messages. Sensor displays flickered between accurate readings and complete nonsense. "Convoy leader to all ships," came the increasingly frantic voice over the radio. "Report your status immediately. This is the Starblade. Our navigation computer is malfunctioning. We show our position as being inside a star," Hunter reporting. "Our sensors indicate we're surrounded by enemy ships, but visual confirmation shows empty space. Thunderstorm here. Our communication array is receiving orders from Admiral Kexavor, but he died 3 years ago. The Villani tried to solve the problem the only way they knew how, with rigid adherence to protocol. Emergency procedures were implemented. Backup systems were activated. But every solution they tried only made things worse because the virus adapted to their responses. It's learning from them, Kim Ji-soo said with satisfaction. Every time they try to fix something, the virus figures out a new way to cause problems. After 6 hours of watching the convoy tear itself apart with confusion, Lee Min-ho decided it was time for the final phase. Choi Wanbin, send a distress signal. Make it look like we're under attack. SOS, SOS. This is the Dominator. We are under attack by unknown forces. Multiple enemy ships detected, requesting immediate assistance. The convoy commander, already dealing with system failures throughout his fleet, made the only decision that seemed logical. He ordered all ships to converge on the Defiance's position to provide support. What he didn't know was that the area around the Defiance was now filled with invisible mines that Kim Ji-soo had been quietly deploying. They weren't explosive devices. They were much more creative than that. As the Villani ships approached, the mines activated. Each one began broadcasting false sensor data, creating the illusion of a massive battle involving hundreds of ships. On the Villani displays, it looked like the Dominator was fighting a desperate last stand against an overwhelming enemy force. "By the ancient codes," whispered the convoy commander. "How many human ships are there?" The tactical display showed chaos. Energy beams flying in all directions, ships exploding, debris fields expanding. The Villani could see it all on their sensors, but when they looked out their viewports, they saw only empty space and the distant form of what they thought was their fellow destroyer. "All ships, open fire on the enemy vessels," the commander ordered. The Villani fleet began shooting at sensor ghosts, their weapons striking nothing but vacuum. But the mines were programmed to react to weapons fire by creating even more false signals. Every shot the Volani fired seemed to trigger return fire from invisible enemies. In the confusion, several Volani ships accidentally targeted each other. Their weapons, designed to penetrate enemy shields, easily cut through the hulls of their own vessels. Within minutes, the convoy was in complete disarray. "Convoy leader, this is the Dominator," Lee Minho transmitted, using a voice synthesizer to sound like a Volani officer. "The enemy is too strong. I'm ordering all cargo ships to jettison their loads and retreat to minimum safe distance." The order made perfect sense to the convoy commander. In Volani military doctrine, cargo was expendable if it meant saving lives and ships. Better to lose supplies than lose an entire fleet. One by one, the cargo ships released their holds, dumping tons of supplies into space. Food, medicine, equipment, and weapons floated away in expanding clouds of debris. "Excellent," Park Yuna said quietly. "That's enough supplies to keep a small colony going for months." As the convoy retreated in confusion, reporting a devastating attack by an unknown number of human vessels, the crew of the Defiance began collecting the jettisoned cargo. They kept what they needed and set the rest adrift with location beacons that other species could find. "The Volani won't miss it," Dr. Han Sora said. "But the slave colonies they've been oppressing will certainly appreciate the food and medical supplies." This pattern repeated itself across the Empire. The Defiance would appear, disguised as a Volani ship, infiltrate a convoy or patrol, and then create chaos through deception and misdirection. Each time, the Volani thought they were fighting a massive human fleet. Each time, they reported devastating losses to overwhelming numbers. But there was still only one ship. The psychological effect was enormous. Volani commanders began seeing human ships everywhere. Routine patrols turned into paranoid hunts for enemies that might not exist. Supply lines were disrupted as convoys took longer and longer routes to avoid areas where humans had been seen. "Their entire fleet is chasing shadows," Park Yuna observed as they reviewed intelligence reports they had intercepted. "Half their ships are hunting for us in sectors where we've never been, and the other half are so paranoid that they're shooting at asteroids," Kim Jisoo added with a grin. Dr. Han Sora was studying the psychological profiles she had developed of their enemies. The Volani mind cannot accept that one ship could cause this much damage, so they're inventing explanations that make sense to them. A secret human fleet with technology beyond their understanding. "Let them think that," Lee Minho said. "Fear is a weapon just like any other. And right now, the Volani Empire is afraid of humanity. But he knew their luck couldn't last forever. Eventually, the Volani would adapt or get lucky. When that happened, the crew of the Defiance would need to be ready with something even more unexpected. "What's our next target?" Park Yuna asked. Lee Minho looked at the star chart, noting the locations of Volani military bases, supply depots, and communication relays. "We're going to attack their homeworld." The crew stared at him in shock. "Sir?" Choi Wanbin said carefully. "Their homeworld is defended by the entire Imperial fleet. It would be suicide." "Only if they see us coming," Lee Minho replied with a smile that would have made a shark nervous. "But they won't, because we're going to be hiding in plain sight." The Volani homeworld of Veltar was a fortress among the stars. Massive orbital defense platforms surrounded the planet like a metal ring, each one bristling with enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. The Imperial Palace sat on the largest continent, its crystal spires reaching toward the sky in a display of absolute power. But power meant nothing if your enemies could turn your own people against you. The Defiance drifted through the outer system, disguised as a damaged cargo hauler, requesting emergency repairs. Their false identity was perfect. Kim Jisoo had constructed it from fragments of destroyed Volani ships, creating a vessel that existed in the Empire's records but had been officially destroyed months earlier. "Ghost ship," she explained with satisfaction. As far as their computers know, we're supposed to be space debris by now. Dr. Han Sora had spent weeks preparing for this mission. She had studied every aspect of Vellani society, looking for cracks in their seemingly perfect civilization. What she had found was disturbing. "They're not as united as they pretend to be," she told the crew as they approached the planet. "The warrior caste rules through force, but the civilian population has no say in government. The nobility lives in luxury while common soldiers die in meaningless battles. There's massive inequality, but their culture forbids them from discussing it openly." "Sounds like every empire in history," Park Yuna observed. "Exactly. And every empire falls eventually, usually from within. Their plan was ambitious beyond anything they had attempted before. Instead of attacking ships or stealing supplies, they were going to attack the very foundation of Vellani society, their belief in the righteousness of their cause. Choi Won-bin had infiltrated the planet's communication network, a task made easier by Vellani assumptions about honesty. Their security was designed to prevent outside interference, but it couldn't stop someone who was already inside the system using legitimate access codes. "Their media is completely controlled by the government," he reported, "but they also have millions of private communication channels, personal messages, family calls, business transactions. If we can access those, we can plant seeds of doubt," Dr. Han Sora finished. "Questions that will grow in their minds like weeds." The campaign began subtly. Anonymous messages started appearing on private channels, asking simple questions that no loyal Vellani was supposed to think about. "Why do the nobles' children never serve in the military? How many worlds have we conquered this year? How many soldiers have died for each one? If we are so honorable, why do we attack species that seek peace?" Each message was carefully crafted to seem like it came from a concerned citizen rather than an outside agitator. Dr. Han Sora had studied Vellani psychology extensively, and she knew exactly which pressure points to target. "They're conditioned to never question authority," she explained, "but they're also taught to value honor and truth above all else. When those two values conflict, it creates cognitive dissonance. The messages spread through the population like a virus." Vellani citizens began asking questions they had never dared to voice before. In private conversations behind closed doors, doubt began to take root. Meanwhile, the crew was gathering intelligence on the Empire's military operations. What they discovered was shocking. "They're not just conquering worlds," Park Yuna said, studying the classified files they had accessed. "They're strip-mining entire planets, enslaving populations, and committing genocide against species that resist. And none of this is reported to their own people," Choi Won-bin added. "The official news only talks about glorious victories and brave warriors defending the Empire." Dr. Han Sora smiled grimly. "Truth is a powerful weapon, especially when it's been hidden for so long." Phase 2 of their operation involved something no one had ever tried before: broadcasting the truth to an entire civilization simultaneously, using captured communication equipment and Choi Won-bin's knowledge of Vellani systems. They prepared to hijack every screen, speaker, and communication device on the planet. The message would last only minutes before they were detected and cut off, so it had to be perfect. Lee Min-ho would deliver the broadcast personally, speaking directly to the Vellani people in their own language. Dr. Han Sora had coached him in the proper inflections and cultural references to make maximum impact. "Citizens of the Vellani Empire," he began, his image appearing on millions of screens across the planet. "I am Captain Lee Min-ho of the human species. Your government has told you that we are your enemies, that we are weak and dishonorable. I want to show you what your leaders don't want you to see." The broadcast that followed was devastating. Using footage captured from Vellani military databases, they showed the Empire's crimes in explicit detail. Civilian populations being massacred, peaceful envoys being executed, entire worlds being stripped of resources and left to die. "This is What your empire does in your name, Lee Minho continued. These are the glorious victories your news reports celebrate. Is this the honor you were promised? But the most damaging part of the broadcast wasn't the footage of alien suffering. It was the evidence of corruption within the Vellani government itself. Your nobles live in palaces while your soldiers sleep in barracks. They eat exotic foods from conquered worlds while you receive standard rations. Their children attend private academies while yours are sent to die in foreign wars. The crew had compiled financial records, communication intercepts, and surveillance footage showing the vast inequality within Vellani society. They revealed how the ruling class had exempted themselves from the very honor codes they enforced on everyone else. You are taught that questioning orders is dishonorable, Lee Minho said. But is it not more dishonorable to follow orders that violate your deepest beliefs? You are a people of integrity. You deserve leaders who share that integrity. The broadcast ended with a simple challenge. We do not ask you to surrender. We do not ask you to abandon your culture. We only ask you to demand the truth from those who rule in your name. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Communication networks across the planet lit up with messages as Vellani citizens shared the footage and discussed what they had seen. Government forces tried to block the spread of information, but it was too late. The truth was loose, and it was spreading faster than they could contain it. Within hours, protests began in major cities. Vellani workers demanded answers from their supervisors. Soldiers questioned their officers. Even some nobles began to voice concerns about the empire's direction. The government's response was predictable: denial, censorship, and force. They declared the broadcast to be enemy propaganda and ordered mass arrests of anyone caught discussing it. But this only validated what the humans had revealed about the empire's authoritarian nature. They're proving our point for us, Dr. Han, Sora observed as they watched the chaos unfold from orbit. Every heavy-handed response shows their people that the government fears the truth. The psychological warfare campaign expanded beyond simple broadcasts. The crew began targeting specific individuals within the Vellani power structure, using their own words against them. They released private communications showing military commanders, discussing the futility of their current strategy. They broadcast recordings of nobles laughing about the inferior species they had conquered. They revealed financial documents showing how war profiteers were getting rich while common soldiers died. The beautiful thing about truth, Choi Won-bin said as he prepared another revelation, is that you don't have to make it up. You just have to find it and show it to the right people. But perhaps the most effective weapon in their arsenal was something even simpler: questions. Anonymous messages continued to appear throughout the Empire's communication networks, each one designed to make Vellani citizens think for themselves. If we are winning this war, why are our casualties increasing? If humans are primitive and weak, how have they evaded our entire fleet for months? If our cause is just, why must it be defended with lies? The questions spread from person to person. Impossible to stop because they weren't calls for rebellion or violence. They were simply invitations to think, to examine, to doubt. And doubt, once planted in the rigid mind of a Vellani warrior, grew like a cancer. Military efficiency began to decline as soldiers hesitated before following orders. Supply lines were disrupted by workers who questioned their purpose. Even the palace guard began to show signs of uncertainty. "Sir," Park Yuna reported, "we're detecting massive communication traffic between Vellani worlds. It looks like the questions are spreading throughout the Empire." Lee Minho nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Let them talk. Let them think. Let them realize what they've been supporting all these years." The crew of the Defiance had done something unprecedented in galactic history. Without firing a shot or destroying a single ship, they had begun the collapse of an empire from within. They had turned the Vellani's greatest strength, their unity and discipline, into a weakness by showing them that their leaders were neither unified nor disciplined, But they were not done yet. The final phase of their plan would require something even more audacious, turning the Empire's own military against itself. Time for Phase 3, Lee Minho announced. We're going to start a civil war. Admiral Thexvar stood in his private quarters aboard the flagship Eternal Glory, staring at reports that made no sense. Human attacks were being reported simultaneously across 12 different sectors. His own fleet had been chasing ghosts for weeks while supply convoys disappeared and entire colonies went dark. But worst of all were the questions. Even among his own officers, he could see doubt creeping into their eyes. Whispered conversations stopped when he entered rooms. His subordinates hesitated before following orders that once would have been executed without question. The humans had done something unthinkable. They had made the Vellani question themselves. Admiral, his communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. It's from the human captain. Put it through, Thexvar growled. Lee Minho's face appeared on the view screen, his expression calm and confident. Behind him, the bridge of the Defiance was visible, looking remarkably intact for a ship that was supposedly being hunted by the entire Vellani fleet. Admiral Thexvar, Lee Minho said with a slight bow that could have been respectful or mocking. I have a proposition for you. I do not negotiate with cowards and saboteurs, Thexvar replied. Then I'll make this simple. You claim to be a warrior of honor. I challenge you to single combat. One ship against one ship. Winner takes all. The bridge fell silent. In Vellani culture, a formal challenge could not be refused without losing. All honor. But Thexvar was suspicious. The humans had already proven they didn't fight fair. What are your terms? He asked carefully. Simple. We meet at coordinates I'll transmit. Empty space, no interference from other ships. Just you and me, testing our skills in honorable combat. And when I defeat you? If you win, my crew will surrender unconditionally. We'll submit to Imperial justice and face whatever punishment you deem appropriate. And if you somehow manage to defeat me? Lee Minho smiled. Then you acknowledge that humans are not the primitive cowards you think we are. You spread word throughout the Empire that we fought with honor and deserve respect. It was a trap. Thexvar knew it was a trap. But it was also an opportunity to restore his reputation and prove Vellani superiority once and for all. More importantly, refusing the challenge would be seen as cowardice by his own crew. I accept, he said finally. Transmit the coordinates. The location Lee Minho had chosen was a debris field in an uninhabited system, the remains of an ancient battle between long-extinct civilizations. Chunks of metal and crystal drifted in slowly rotating patterns, creating a maze of obstacles and hiding places. Perfect, Kim Jasu said as she studied the tactical display. They'll think we chose this location for cover, but that's not the real reason. For weeks, the crew had been preparing for this confrontation. They had studied Thexvar's combat records, analyzed his ship's capabilities, and most importantly, understood his psychology. The Admiral was a traditionalist who believed absolutely in the superiority of Vellani warfare. That belief would be his downfall. Dr. Hans Sora had spent days mapping the debris field and calculating orbital mechanics. Every piece of wreckage follows predictable patterns, she explained. With the right timing, we can turn the entire battlefield into a weapon. When the Eternal Glory arrived at the designated coordinates, it found the Defiance waiting in the center of the debris field. The human ship looked small and fragile compared to the massive Vellani dreadnought, like a minnow facing a shark. This is Admiral Thexvar, came the transmission. I offer you one final chance to surrender with honor. Thank you, but we'll take our chances, Lee Minho replied. Shall we begin? The battle started exactly as Thexvar expected. The two ships faced each other across empty space, their weapons charged and ready. It was the classic Vellani form of combat, direct, honest, and decisive. Fire! Thexvar ordered. Energy beams lanced out from the eternal glory, striking the Defiance's shields and causing visible damage. The human ship returned fire, but their weapons barely scratched the Volani vessel's advanced armor. As expected, Thexvar muttered with satisfaction. Human technology is no match for ours. But Lee Minho wasn't trying to win through superior firepower. He was playing a much longer game. The Defiance began moving through the debris field, weaving between chunks of ancient metal and using them for cover. To Thexvar, it looked like cowardly behavior, but he followed anyway. The hunt was part of the challenge. What the Admiral didn't know was that the debris field had been carefully prepared. Kim Jisoo had spent weeks placing small charges and guidance systems throughout the wreckage. Each piece of debris was now under remote control, waiting for the right moment to move. He's taking the bait, Park Yuna reported as the eternal glory pursued them deeper into the field. Steady, Lee, Minho said. Let him get exactly where we want him. The cat-and-mouse game continued for 30 minutes. The Volani ship fired whenever it had a clear shot, slowly wearing down the Defiance's shields. To any observer, it looked like the human ship was desperately trying to avoid a fair fight. Finally, Thexvar lost patience. Enough of this cowardice! Face me like a warrior! He ordered his ship to accelerate directly toward the Defiance, intending to end the battle with overwhelming firepower. It was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. Now, Lee Minho said quietly, Kim Jisoo activated her hidden charges. Throughout the debris field, chunks of metal and crystal began moving in carefully calculated patterns. To Thexvar, it looked like the ancient wreckage was simply shifting due to gravitational forces. But the movement wasn't random. Every piece of debris was designed to converge on the eternal glory's position at precisely the right moment. Admiral, massive debris. Movement detected, his sensor operator reported. We're surrounded by moving objects. Evasive maneuvers, Thexvar ordered. But it was too late. The debris struck his ship from all directions simultaneously. None of the individual pieces were large enough to cause serious damage, but the cumulative effect was devastating. The eternal glory's shields overloaded, her sensors were blinded, and her weapon systems were disrupted. How is this possible? Thexvar demanded. Sir, the debris appears to be guided somehow. These aren't random collisions. That's when Thexvar realized the truth. The humans hadn't chosen this location for cover. They had chosen it because they had turned the entire battlefield into a weapon. Every piece of wreckage, every floating chunk of metal had been prepared in advance. They planned this, he whispered in horrified admiration. The entire debris field is under their control. The Defiance emerged from behind a large piece of wreckage, its weapons fully charged. But instead of finishing off the disabled Volani ship, Lee Minho opened a communication channel. Do you yield, Admiral? Thexvar looked around his damaged bridge. His weapons were offline, his shields were down, and his ship was trapped in a maze of controlled debris. He had been outmaneuvered completely. But more than that, he had been outsmarted in a way that no Volani warrior had ever experienced. The humans hadn't broken any rules of honorable combat. They had simply redefined what the battlefield meant. I yield, he said finally, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Thank you, Admiral. Your honor remains intact. You fought bravely, against an enemy using tactics you had never encountered. How? Thexvar asked. How did you turn space itself into a weapon? We didn't fight the battle you expected, Lee Minho replied. We fought the battle we designed. Every warrior knows their weapons and their enemy. But we also know our environment, and we're not afraid to use it. The implications hit Thexvar like a physical blow. If humans could turn a debris field into a weapon, what else could they weaponize? Asteroid belts? Gas clouds? The space around planets themselves? Your people have been thinking about warfare all wrong, Lee Minho continued. You see battles as contests between ships and warriors. We see them as contests between minds and ideas can turn anything into a weapon. As the eternal glory limped away from the debris field, Thexvar found himself facing a terrible truth. The humans weren't just militarily superior, they were evolutionarily superior. They had developed a form of warfare that made traditional concepts of honor and strength irrelevant. Word of the Admiral's defeat spread through the Vellani fleet within hours. The greatest military commander in the Empire had been beaten not through superior force, but through superior thinking. If Thexvar could be defeated so completely, what hope did anyone else have? But the psychological damage went deeper than military concerns. The humans had proven that Vellani warfare wasn't just ineffective against their tactics, it was obsolete. Every assumption the Empire had made about combat had been shown to be wrong. For a culture built on military supremacy, this realization was devastating. If their way of war was flawed, what else might be wrong? What other foundational beliefs might be illusions? The questions that had started with simple broadcasts were now spreading through the military itself. Officers began to doubt not just their orders, but the entire system that gave those orders. Soldiers questioned whether their sacrifices were meaningful if their tactics were so easily defeated. The Vellani Empire was beginning to tear itself apart, not from external pressure, but from internal doubt. And the humans had done it all with just one ship and the willingness to fight in ways their enemies couldn't imagine. The emergency session of the Vellani High Council was unlike any in the Empire's 1,000-year history. Councillor Vex Thul paced the marble floors of the great chamber, his forearms gesturing wildly as he spoke. Admiral Thexvar has been defeated by a single human vessel, he announced to the assembled nobles. Our greatest military commander, humiliated by primitives using tactics that violate every principle of honorable warfare. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Some called for Thexvar's execution for cowardice. Others demanded an immediate assault on human space with the entire Imperial fleet. But Councillor Mortek, the youngest member of the ruling body, raised a disturbing question. What if they're not primitives? He asked. What if we've been wrong? About everything? The chamber fell silent. In Vellani culture, questioning the fundamental assumptions of their civilization was tantamount to heresy. Explain yourself, Vex Thul demanded. The humans have defeated our forces repeatedly using methods we never imagined. They've turned our own systems against us, spread doubt among our people, and now they've proven that our military doctrine is flawed. Perhaps it's time to consider that they might be superior to us. The reaction was immediate and violent. Older counselors shouted down Mortek's words, calling him a traitor and a coward. But some of the younger nobles looked thoughtful, as if the same doubts had been growing in their own minds. Enough! Vex Thul roared. The humans are vermin! They fight without honor, use deception instead of strength, and corrupt our people with lies. We will not dignify their cowardice by treating them as equals. Then what do you propose? Asked Councillor Zelnara. Total war. No more honor codes. No more restraint. We declare the humans to be non-sentient animals, unworthy of civilized treatment. We use every weapon at our disposal to exterminate them completely. The proposal sent shockwaves through the council. For 1,000 years, the Vellani had conquered their enemies while maintaining strict codes of honorable conduct. To abandon those codes entirely would mean abandoning everything that made them who they were. You're suggesting we become the very monsters the humans claim we are, Mortek said quietly. I'm suggesting we become victorious, Vex Thul replied. Honor means nothing if we're all dead. The vote was close, but fear won over principle. By a margin of just 3 votes, the Council authorized the use of planet-killer weapons against human colonies and the complete abandonment of all traditional warfare restrictions. The decision would prove to be the Empire's greatest mistake. Within hours of the Council's vote, word spread throughout the Vellani military. The reactions were immediate and divided. Hardline commanders welcomed the new freedom to use any means necessary. but a significant portion of the officer corps was horrified. Colonel Dex Morrow, a decorated veteran of 20 campaigns, stood before his assembled troops on the destroyer Righteous Fury. His voice shook with emotion as he read the new orders. By decree of the High Council, all humans are to be considered non-sentient and unworthy of honorable treatment. We are authorized to use any methods, including planet-killer weapons, to achieve total victory. A young lieutenant raised his hand. Sir, doesn't this violate the code of honor we swore to uphold? Dex Morrow looked at the young officer for a long moment. Yes, Lieutenant, it does. The colonel made his decision in that instant. I cannot and will not follow orders that violate everything we claim to believe in. Any officer who feels the same may join me. The rest are free to follow the Council's commands. Half the crew followed Dex Morrow off the ship. Similar scenes played out across the Empire as the military split between those willing to abandon honor for victory and those who refused to compromise their principles. Meanwhile, the humans were preparing for the Empire's escalation. Dr. Han Sora had predicted this response based on her psychological analysis of Vellani leadership. They're cornered animals now, she explained to the crew of the Defiance. They'll either surrender or become completely savage. Unfortunately, their culture makes surrender impossible. So they'll try to exterminate us, Park Yuna said. Yes, but in doing so, they'll destroy themselves. Watch. The first planet-killer weapon was deployed against a human colony in the Outer Rim. The weapon functioned exactly as designed, cracking the planet's crust and rendering it uninhabitable. But the attack was broadcast live across Vellani communication networks by sympathetic officers who had been secretly recording military operations. The footage was devastating. Vellani citizens watched in horror as their military destroyed an entire world, killing millions of civilians who had never posed any threat to the Empire. Children, families, entire communities wiped out in the name of victory. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Protests erupted on every Vellani world. Military units began refusing orders. Some colonies declared independence from the Empire entirely. "This is not who we are," became the rallying cry of the growing resistance movement. But the High Council doubled down on their strategy. More planet killers were authorized. Military commanders who refused to use them were executed for treason. Civilian protesters were arrested en masse. Each heavy-handed response only proved the humans' point about the true nature of Vellani leadership. The Empire was revealing itself to be exactly what Lee Min-ho had claimed, a corrupt tyranny that maintained power through fear and violence. The civil war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't fought between different species or even different governments. It was fought between two different visions of what the Vellani Empire should be. On one side were the traditionalists, led by officers like Colonel Dex Morrow, who believed that honor and principle mattered more than victory. They fought to preserve the values they thought their empire represented. On the other side were the extremists, commanded by loyalists like Admiral Gexthul, who believed that survival justified any action. They fought to preserve the Empire's power at any cost. Caught in the middle were billions of ordinary Vellani citizens who simply wanted the violence to stop. The humans, meanwhile, had become something unprecedented in galactic history, the catalyst for an empire's self-destruction. They didn't need to fire another shot. The Vellani were destroying themselves more effectively than any external enemy could have managed. "It's working exactly as we predicted," Choi Wanbin reported as he monitored Vellani communications. "Their fleet is split almost 50-50. Some ships are hunting us, others are fighting each other, and a few have gone rogue entirely." "What about civilian casualties?" Lee Min-ho asked. Surprisingly low, considering the scale of the conflict. "Most of the fighting is between military units. The civilian population is largely staying out of it," Dr. Han Sora nodded approvingly. "That's because this isn't really about military conquest. It's about ideology. The Villani are fighting over what they want their civilization to become. Kim. Jasu looked up from her engineering station. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from a Villani ship. It's Colonel Dexamaro. The image that appeared on screen showed a tired-looking Villani officer surrounded by the bridge of a destroyer. Behind him, human civilians could be seen working alongside Villani crew members. Captain Lee Minho, Dexamaro said formally. I am Colonel Dexamaro of the Villani Traditionalist Fleet. I want to propose a ceasefire. I'm listening, Colonel. My forces control approximately 30% of the Imperial fleet. We have no desire to continue this war, but we also cannot allow the extremists to use planet-killer weapons against innocent populations. What do you propose? An alliance. Your people have proven that there are alternatives to endless conquest. Perhaps it's time for the Villani to learn those alternatives. Lee Minho exchanged glances with his crew. This was an opportunity they had never expected. Colonel, are you speaking for yourself or for a larger group? I represent 15 admirals, over 300 ships, and the governments of 12 Villani colonies. We want to end this war and build something better. And what about the extremists? Dexamaro's expression darkened. They have chosen to abandon everything that made us Villani. They are no longer our brothers. They are the enemy of everything we believe in. The alliance that formed over the following days was unprecedented. Humans and Villani working together, sharing technology and tactics, fighting not to conquer but to liberate. The Traditionalist fleet provided the firepower while human crews provided the strategy and innovation. Together, they began systematically dismantling the extremist forces. But more importantly, they were proving that cooperation was possible between species that had seemed destined for eternal conflict. The war was far from over, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. The Villani Empire, as it had existed for 1,000 years, was finished. What would replace it remained to be seen. But for the first time since the conflict began, there was hope for something better than endless war. 6 months after the Civil War began, the Villani homeworld of Veltar was unrecognizable. The crystal spires of the Imperial Palace lay in ruins, shattered by orbital bombardment from the planet's own defense platforms. In the streets below, Villani civilians worked alongside humans and dozens of other liberated species to rebuild their civilization from the ground up. Captain Lee Minho stood on the observation deck of the space station that had once been Admiral Thexvar's flagship. The massive vessel had been converted into a diplomatic center where representatives from across the former empire were hammering out the details of a new government. It's hard to believe this all started with 5 humans and a damaged exploration ship, Dr. Han Sora said as she joined him at the viewing port. Below them, the surface of Veltar sparkled with construction lights as new cities rose from the ashes of the old. But the real changes weren't visible from space. They were happening in the minds and hearts of billions of beings who were learning, for the first time in their lives, what freedom meant. Did we win? Park Yuna asked, arriving with Kim Ji-soo and Choi Wonbin. Lee Minho considered the question carefully. I don't think anyone won, but I think everyone learned something important. The final battle of the war hadn't been a battle at all. It had been a revelation. Admiral Gex Thule, the last commander of the extremist forces, had barricaded himself in the Imperial Palace with a small army of fanatic loyalists. He possessed 3 planet-killer weapons and had threatened to use them on Veltar itself rather than surrender. If I cannot preserve the Empire, he had broadcast to the galaxy, then I will ensure it dies with proper honor. The threat had unified every faction against him. Traditionalist Villani, human forces, liberated species, and even some of his own troops turned on the Admiral's final stronghold. But it was Lee Minho who had proposed the solution that ended the war without firing. A shot! We don't storm the palace, he had told the Alliance commanders. We simply wait. Wait for what? Colonel Dexamaro had asked. For him to realize that he's already lost. The empire he's trying to preserve doesn't exist anymore. His own people have rejected everything he stands for. He's not defending a civilization. He's defending an idea that has no support outside his own mind. The siege had lasted 3 weeks. During that time, Alliance forces had done something unprecedented. They had ignored Gexthul completely. Instead of attacking the palace, they had focused on rebuilding the cities around it. Instead of trying to capture the admiral, they had helped his former subjects create new lives. Every day, Gexthul could see from his windows that the world was moving on without him. His threats meant nothing because there was nothing left to threaten. The empire was gone, replaced by something he couldn't understand or control. On the final day, his own guards had simply opened the gates and walked away. They had families to return to, new lives to build, and better things to do than die for a cause that no longer existed. Gexthul had been found alone in the imperial throne room, still wearing his ceremonial armor but surrounded by empty halls. He had surrendered without resistance, a broken old warrior who finally understood that the galaxy had moved beyond him. "The Admiral asked to speak with you," Park Yuna reported, bringing Lee Minho back to the present. "He's in Detention Bay, 12. Lee Minho found the former Emperor of the Galaxy sitting in a simple cell, staring out through a small window at the construction work below. Gexthul looked older than his years, his purple eyes dim with defeat. "I wanted to understand," the Admiral said without turning around. "How did 5 primitives destroy the greatest empire in galactic history?" "We didn't destroy anything," Lee Minho replied. "We just showed your people what was already there." Which was? Doubt, questions, the desire for something better. Your empire was built on the idea that strength was the only thing that mattered. But strength without purpose is just violence, and violence without justice is just cruelty. Gexthul finally turned to face him. "You made us weak." "No, Admiral. We made you think. And thinking made you realize that you were already weak. The empire fell because it deserved to fall. It was built on lies, maintained through fear, and justified by traditions that no longer served any purpose except to preserve the power of people like you. So what comes next? Do you conquer us? Make us your slaves?" Lee Minho laughed, a sound that seemed to genuinely puzzle the